This podcast is proudly brought to you by MaximusMark.com. Hey folks, it's Maximus Mark. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Lierre Keith. Lierre is the author of The Vegetarian Myth, which is not just about vegetarianism, but the whole farming and agricultural system. It's an unbelievable book. Lierre has broken up the book into three main parts: moral, political, and nutritional vegetarianism. It is an amazing read and I highly recommend it. Thus the reason I've been pumped all week for this show. Lierre has spent a whopping 20 years as a vegetarian. Her actual experience with vegetarianism is why many consider her to be the world's leading authority on vegetarianism and its problems. 20 years is enough time to know if something works. Lierre has always stood for justice and compassion, and after writing The Vegetarian Myth, Lierre has been able to study the broader picture of the world's food supply. She offers insight and wisdom. I believe she definitely has some of the answers in regards to what should be done with the world's food supply, a very important topic for anyone who eats. So with that said, let's welcome today's guest. Lierre Keith, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. I wish I could meet that amazing person you just talked about. That's very sweet.
You're too humble. All right. Well, first question, probably the most obvious. Can you please share with our listeners your background, your story, why you're a vegetarian, and why after 20 years you found it unsustainable?
Right. Well, first of all, I was a vegan. I was never a vegetarian.
Okay.
It was all or nothing for me. And I became a vegan when I was 16. And I think like a lot of people who decide to try that out, the reason is because I met some other vegans, and they had some very compelling arguments about why this was a good thing to do. So it seemed, from this package that I was presented, that if I simply removed animal products from my diet, I could do all this great stuff. I could improve my health, I could save the planet, I could stop animals from being hurt, and I could provide food for hungry people. So it seemed like a really simple thing to do to solve all of those problems. So I took it up with, the fervor of a teenager, and I did it for 20 years. The reason that I stopped was because my health failed catastrophically, and that is, where the road ends if you do this long term. There's just way too many deficiencies, and there are way too many problems with this diet for it to be sustainable long term. And I found that out to my great detriment. So that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is that I really don't want other people to have to suffer the way that I did. It's really not for any good reason at all. You're not doing any of the things that this diet claims that it does, and you will in the end damage your body.
Awesome. Well, before we get into, the meat and veg of the interview, I just want to get some background on a few topics. One of the topics, not a lot of people obviously think about this all that much, but let's start with the soil. A lot of people don't realize that soil is very, very alive, or at least should be alive. People often don't think about this, but what does soil eat?
Soil. Well, soil is not, we think of this as being the sort of insensate, dirt, and it's not. I mean, 1 tablespoon of soil can contain over 1 million different living creatures, and a handful of soil can contain over 1 billion living creatures, and a meter of topsoil can contain over 1,000 different species of animals. So, yeah, it's hungry. And, depending on which little critter you want to look at, they eat all kinds of different things. But, all of this together makes healthy soil. So you need plants, and at this point you need animals, and you need both of those to make healthy soil. And it's, the bacteria that break that all down. And there's a great quote by James Nardi, who's a soil scientist, who says, it's to the bacteria of the world that I'm going to get this exactly right, but he basically says that it's the bacteria of the soil that are constantly renewing our earth, and that without them, there would not be life. And yes, they need to be fed. So, they're eating all the other biological matter that falls upon them, and a lot of that is cellulose from plants, but, also animals. And we all play a role in that cycle, keeping that soil fed. I mean, the thing is that we owe our entire existence to 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. So when you take away that soil, it means that land life is essentially over. There's nothing for us. All those biological processes will grind to a halt, and there will be nothing left. So no plants, no animals, no bacteria, and that means a dead planet. Well, life of the oceans might be able to continue, but certainly all land life, that would not be possible without soil. So this, I think, is why a lot of indigenous people have these concepts of, the soil and the plants as our parents and our grandparents and our beloved kin, because that's what the soil did. The plants and the soil together created the topsoil, and they also created that oxygen-rich environment that were really a cradle for animals like humans. So it's true. I mean, they worked on it for millions of years, and finally the planet could support animals. So our lives are very precarious. It's really we're dependent on these millions of other creatures that we can't even see. And by doing agriculture, we've been destroying all of that, and that's one of the big problems right now.
So just so we can get some definitions for our listeners who might not be familiar, the difference between, I guess, normal soil and topsoil, could just kind of differentiate the difference between the two.
Yeah, topsoil is like the top inches, like usually 6 to 8 inches of soil, and that's where almost all the biological activity happens. Beneath that, now topsoil can be a lot deeper, like in a prairie situation, in grasslands. I mean, those are an incredible plant, and they do an amazing job at building topsoil. So that topsoil can be 8 feet deep, 10 feet deep, 12 feet deep. In forests, it's a lot thinner. And of course, in things like tundras and other kinds of polycultures, it would be even thinner because there's not a lot of biological activity going on. But underneath that is just the subsoil, and that's mostly just kind of minerals and clay and rock and stuff like that. Not a lot of biological activity, but it's in that top chunk. That's where everything's going on. And that, of course, is part of the problem because when we do agriculture, we're destroying that, which means we're destroying all that biological activity.